listed down somewhere along the way, knowing me. But
Oh, we don't.
what was that song we listened to? Oh, Becca and all of you,
Uh-huh.
you need to go online to YouTube
Mhm.
and search for Alton Beal. Alton is the president of Ambassador Baptist College, but he was also my dean of men under me when I was dean of students there. And we still have a good relationship. But you need to go on YouTube and just type in the search thing, Alton Beal, Alton Beal.
His music CD is
What?
It's a music CD.
Oh, there's a music, but
Yeah.
the things he's done. But you need to look at the one that where he sings, "How Can It Be?" And
It's the music CD.
that was one we sang that in our in one of our graduate programs at not at Ambassador, at Tabernacle,
Mhm.
and we sang it a cappella with a bunch of just godly people there and pastors from different places and their wives. It was a banquet setting, and I'm telling you, and it was just absolutely beautiful. And I liked the song before. First time I ever heard it was in seminary at Temple,
He
and
sings it.
but Alton sings it,
Oh,
and he does very well with it. And you need to listen to it. And when you listen, don't listen with your ears. Listen with the ears of your heart. And
we know his heart.
yeah, and we know Alton, so we don't have a problem with it, shall we say? But all right, okay. How did we get on that?
He just did it.
So now I need a volunteer. Vivian.
Yes,
Hi,
sir.
Vivian.
Hi.
So do you see what it's like being around me? You get an idea?
Oh, yes.
Can you
For
imagine
quite some years I have.
Yes. So can you imagine what it would be like if I actually pastored a church? We wouldn't know. We wouldn't know when the service began. We wouldn't know when it ended.
I have a better one.
We'd be doing all kinds of. We'd be singing in the middle of messages, and we'd be doing all kinds of things that wouldn't fit the pattern.
I have a better one. Or to be married to you for 56 years.
So, oh yeah, I have to say, my poor wife. I don't know how she's made it, but somehow, and that just tells you there is grace for every trial. So let's see here. I want us to take a look at this passage, and it's in both Matthew and Luke, regarding the centurion who had asked Jesus to heal his servant. And you're going to find, as a matter of fact, a woman pastor in Virginia Beach actually had written something about this, and I used to have it, but I probably threw it away because it was garbage. And she wrote something on this passage. This is a Black woman pastor, and I don't have anything against Black women pastors as such, if they preach and teach the truth. But she didn't. And she said the word pice, which is used in this passage, was a word that was used for a homosexual partner. And so she said that what this centurion was doing was asking for Jesus to heal his homosexual partner. That is not true. Could a homosexual partner be called that? Yes. Is that the meaning of the word? No. But see, she took it to mean what she wanted it to be, to do something that was totally contrary to what God had said. That's the ungodliness. And I don't remember her name. I don't even remember the church. But I can tell you, I would never want anything to do with her or her church unless she said, Brother Sheets, I need to learn. When she would say she needs to learn, then I would teach. But if she wants to debate something, or if she wants to represent her totally erroneous, ungodly ideas, then I would say, Lord, would you do what is necessary to remove her from that position of influence. And when I would pray that way, I would literally be asking God, would you either take away her health so she cannot do this job that she thinks she's doing so well, or that her life would be forfeited? Would you take her out totally, Lord? And I have no qualms asking for something like that. If you have that sort of thing, and whether it's a male or a female, and they're destroying the faith of people in God, they're destroying the people of God. And I'd say that for so many others. And I've said it about Baptist preachers too. And I mean it about Baptist preachers too, evangelists and all the rest of them. And I realize sometimes that God superintends and says, no, Ken, I am not going to do that just because you think it should be done. I'm going to leave that stumbling block in the middle of my people, because if my people will believe me, if they will believe me and what I said, then they will recognize the errors of these false teachers and false preachers, and they will turn aside from them and come to me, the truth. And that is that. And when he does that, and he leaves that person in a position of influence, then I say, thank you, Lord. Thank you for correcting me. But I am not going to submit myself to those people anymore. But this centurion recognized the greatness and the nature of the authority of Jesus Christ. And I put as a subtitle to this passage deals with the essence of causing firmness to God. What does it really mean to cause firmness to God? So here, follow with me for just a little bit. And the more the text is down here. And like I said, I haven't finished this document, and it may never be finished. Don't really worry about that. But I want to live by the truth of it. The typical human perspective of authority and accountability, and this is what we see in our churches. It's increasing in terrible proportions. Authority and accountability are inseparably intertwined and interrelated. Generally, as authority decreases, accountability does the same. The typical human perspective, however, tends to think of them differently. From the perspective of the average person, one who does not possess great influence, listen, this is the way they see it. Authority seems to flow down in decreasing amounts from those of greater authority. But in the eyes of that same person, accountability seems to flow up. So you got authority flowing down to these lower ranking people in authority, but accountability is flowing up in increasing amounts to those of greater authority. So if you have more authority, you have more accountability. Less authority, less accountability. This is not to say that this same individual does not recognize the actual correlation between the two. It is just a matter of the way humans typically think of the two. And the typical human thinking does not always reflect reality. So, the human perspective of the nature of authority. The downward flow of authority occurs as it is delegated from a higher authority to a lower authority, with a commensurate diminishing as each distributes to the next only a portion of his or her total possession. God, the creator, owner, and designer of all that exists, is the supreme authority over all that exists, because it all belongs to him. And by the way, it all exists within him. It is his possession, not by some secondary activity, but by the fact that it would not exist if he had not acted to bring it into existence. This makes him the ultimate authority, and all valid authority derives its existence from him. By the way, you need to read Romans 13:1 that way too. All valid authority derives its existence from him. Valid authority, key word. That is, all valid authority of any kind not only finds its origin in God, but it exists as a delegation from him. And by the way, he never delegates authority to violate his design. He cannot do that. He's the unchanging, unfalse God. It exists as a delegation from him, whether that authority recognizes this delegation or not. This makes authority a stewardship, in that all that exists in the creation, and especially the created beings, have received authority from the Creator to be and to do that which he designed them to be and to do. This in turn makes everything in the creation accountable to God for its use of that which he has delegated to it. Now the centurion had heard reports, and here's some of the text of Matthew 8, and we got 5 through 7 here. We'll go down to the rest of it, and I'll show you some of the text of Luke as well. So, and when Jesus was entered into Capernaum, there came unto him a centurion, beseeching him and saying, Lord, my servant lieth at home, sick of the palsy, grievously tormented. And Jesus saith unto him, I will come and heal him. So, and then we go down, Luke says, of this centurion, and when he heard of Jesus, he sent unto him the elders of the Jews, beseeching him that he would come and heal his servant. And then the scripture says, then Jesus went with them, as that's what Luke's text. And when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying unto him, Lord, trouble not thyself, for I am not worthy that thou shouldest enter under my roof. Wherefore neither thought I myself worthy to come unto thee, but say in a word, and my servant shall be healed. Now let's go over to the Matthew text again. So the centurion answered and said, Jesus is going to go with them. But the centurion answered and said, Lord, I am not worthy that thou shouldest come under my roof, but speak the word only, and my servant shall be healed. And listen to his reasoning. Listen to what this man saw of Jesus. For I am a man under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to this man, go, and he goeth. To another, come, and he cometh. And to my servant, do this, and he doeth it. When Jesus heard, he marveled, and said unto them that followed, Verily I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. So let's go down to the bottom of this a little bit now. And you can, if you want to, you got the Syriac text there if you want to increase it and such like that at some point in time. So the centurion's recognition of the authority of Jesus. The centurion had heard reports of Jesus and how he had healed individuals by merely speaking their healing into existence. As a leader in the Roman governmental system, this man understood the nature of authority. The authority he possessed and which he wielded over his subordinates had been delegated to him. That is, he himself was a man under authority. In like manner, those under his authority were bound to do his will and to exercise authority as he delegated it to them. He was accustomed to communicating his will and the associated accountability to obey it simply by speaking words. This man knew authority, folks. All he had to do was speak the words to those who were under him, and it was going to be done, or else. His words represented his authority to those beings under him, whether they were human or animal, and his words, however simply he spoke them, would move them to accomplish whatever action he willed. This Jesus, excuse me a minute, this Jesus had been going about the region performing healings in a manner which demonstrated that he possessed an authority far superior to that of any human. Certainly, the centurion had heard the reports but in a wisdom rare among men, and I should say rare among human beings in total. He had recognized and accepted them as evidence that the man Jesus of Nazareth possessed a power and an authority that greatly exceeded that of any normal human. He also recognized that the authority of Jesus extended into realms of existence which were far beyond the temporal, earthly existence which formed the bounds of humanity. Jesus possessed both the authority and ability to impose his will in realms of existence which humans could only conceive as possible, as potentially existing within the grasp of beings far more powerful than they. Thus, when the centurion put together all the pieces of the evidence, and listen, folks, you need to be perceiving at this very moment the relationship of what the centurion did to what we call saving faith is. When the centurion put together all the pieces of the evidence, he saw a person whose authority and ability was of a nature that exceeded not only that of earthly temporal beings, but also that of the mighty unseen beings which often manifested themselves to humans, talking about angels. The centurion recognized that Jesus possessed authority over the creation, an authority not bound by time and place, but which superseded time and place. Such was the authority of this man, this Jesus, that he needed only to will that the servant be healed, and that healing would be accomplished. The authority of Jesus was not simply over humans and beasts. The authority of Jesus was over the creation, and all creation was accountable to do his will. And you need to stop and think before you say, well, but this was in the New Testament time when Jesus was alive. You need to stop and think. This centurion had heard, but he had not actually experienced any of these things as far as we can tell. There's no evidence that he actually experienced any of these things that Jesus had done, but he knew. He heard about Jesus, and he said, if these things are true, and he looked at the widespread evidence, everywhere was the evidence, everywhere he looked around him, that this Jesus really had authority and power over the creation. And he put those individual factoids together and reached a conclusion that was accurate about Jesus. So this was the firmness, the faith that Jesus perceived in the centurion, but which he had not seen in the Hebrews, the very people through whom God had given his revelation to humans. For many years, the Hebrew people had been schooled and instructed in the externals of a belief system, which the Creator himself had intended to be internal. God had intended his belief system to be one wherein the externals were but a manifestation of a true internal relationship with him. The Hebrews and their converts knew the external requirements of their religion, and some, typically those in leadership, had conformed their lives very well to those standards, but something was missing. Sounds like our churches in the present day. Something was missing. Something was missing of the heart of the God they claimed to worship and serve. Something that moved them to perceive the true needs of every individual human. Something that influenced every human it touched to develop a true and accurate personal relationship with the Creator. Certainly, some individuals perceived the lack of such a heart, but the pressures to conform were a barrier to full expression of what they knew to be God's design. And conforming to a set of external standards was easier than standing, often alone, against the system accepted by virtually all in leadership positions. The accuracy of their personal relationship to God would have to remain subordinated to the system of external evidences, which humans, not God, had established to define a personal relationship. The centurion recognized the transcendent authority of Jesus and conformed his thinking to it. And having done so, he experienced, listen, he recognized the transcendent authority of Jesus. That is, he saw him more as what he was, conformed his thinking to it. And having done so, what came as a result? Exactly what God designed to result. He experienced the success and blessedness which Jesus himself, as the transcendent creator, had intended. He had designed his human creations to assimilate the evidence of his person, evidence which inexorably worked in the entirety of creation, and to properly correlate that evidence to see the reality of its implications, and then conform themselves to that truth. Humans were to see him as God and themselves as his created beings, subject to the criteria of his design. And conforming themselves to that absolute reality, they would experience the blessedness of living in a personal relationship with him. Such conformity is the essence of causing firmness to, that is, the essence of believing in God. And you can see, I said, men are accountable to use the authority delegated to them, ... Women are accountable to use the authority delegated to them, ... But any thoughts or questions before we go from this? Going back over into Genesis 4. Anything? Can you imagine? Can you imagine Jesus walking about all these people who had been the people through whom he had given his design, and yet they have missed the main point. So let's see.
We have a hand.
Yes,
So
Pete.
I just want to make sure I understand that first paragraph there that you're looking at right there. When you're talking about the accountability, you're not talking about the individual authority or delegate being a wait, let me make sure I'm thinking this right. They don't have greater, they are not held to greater accountability the farther up the chain you go. It's the people below have accountability toward the people above them. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's the way we think of it.
Right.
We think of it that we have more of an accountability to those people who are over us in authority. But when you realize that every individual possesses authority, not delegated by the world, but delegated by the Creator. There's a specific authority delegated by the Creator to each one. And this is related to another paper as well, and I didn't bring it in here because it was longer. But we have this idea, I call it let's see, when somebody is I call it loyalty. This is the way authorities in our churches see loyalty. They see that everybody in the church, everybody who is under them, under their authority, is accountable to show loyalty to them. So loyalty flows up. So it always flows up to the authorities. But the loyalty of the authority that needs to flow down to every individual under his authority, there's less accountability there. He doesn't have as much accountability to be loyal to those under him as those under him have an accountability to be loyal to him. And that's you can see that in the lives of dictators. You could think about, if you wanted, and I know an old example, but Hitler did a good job of it. Hitler did not. Hitler presented himself as actually caring about the individual German people and others who came under his wings and so forth. He presented himself as thinking about them and caring about them and wanting the best for them. But in reality, he did not care how many of them died to fulfill his plans. That is, he had no real loyalty to them. So he had less accountability when he should have had greater accountability in his position to all of them, in a sense. But the people under him, they were absolutely accountable with their lives to do his will. And so we do that from the perspective of the average person. Those people who do not possess great influence, they think authority flows down in decreasing amounts, but in their eyes, accountability flows up. So they have more accountability to those above them. And I didn't say that very well in there, but that's the idea. There's an accountability that they have to be loyal to those over them, but those over them do not have an accountability and a need to be loyal to those under them. And that is typical in our independent, well, probably typical in almost all our churches, but especially in independent Baptist churches where I've gone for years. So, and I can tell you, we all say, well, yes, well, we want to be loyal to every person under us. Well, all you have to do is do it the way God would have you to do it then. But you don't see it in churches. It's all about you who are under me, you support my ministry. And how many times through the years, I'll say it this way, how many times through the years have I heard preachers and pastors especially say, refer to it as my ministry, my ministry, my ministry. So it's his ministry. Everybody's accountable to support and ensure that it's successful. But for him to ensure that the individual people are successful and for him to have loyalty to them, it does not flow down the same way. So people see it differently, but I'm telling you, all you got to do is look around you. You don't see loyalty flowing down. You see loyalty flowing up. That's the only way authorities see it. So that probably didn't answer as well. You know what? You do bring it up, though, Pete. That when I read that, I looked and I said, you know what? This is not clear. So that means I have another job. I need to clarify that.
No, I figured that's probably what you were saying. In a related concept, I heard recently somebody make the statement, and I know we've all heard this from time to time, regarding being a servant, that we all want to be a servant and until we're treated like one. And usually that's used to describe the underlings. You know, if you want to be a servant, then, then really want to be a servant, no matter, even if you're treated like a servant, just take it and be a servant. But the man who would purport himself to be a servant of the Lord wouldn't often want to put that shoe on his own foot.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. He wants to be identified as a servant, but he doesn't want to be, shall we say, actively recognized as a servant. He wants the position, but he doesn't want
The treatment.
the treatment that should come with it, if you will. And it's very difficult. And I can tell you, even in the secular world, I've been in jobs where I can tell you, I enjoyed more being in charge than being the guy going and doing all the stuff. It was a lot more fun being in charge and telling people go do this and go do that, like the centurion, than it was to go into the boss and the boss says go do this and you say but I don't want to, and he says go do it anyway. So and you know, authorities in our churches, as we've talked about before, we would say well, we don't, our authorities would say, we don't force people to do anything. Oh, we don't. Then just let there be a special meeting, as we said last week. Let there be a revival. Let there be a Bible conference. Let there be a speaker. Let there be a work day. Let there be anything like this. And you don't show up. And before the day, they make sure that you all realize that if you don't show up, you're not doing what you should do. Because everybody needs to be a part of this. And years ago, I began realizing, and I can tell you, Pastor Baker and I talked about it, and I said, Pastor, I said, I got things to do. There are people who can do these jobs, these physical labor jobs around the church, but they cannot do what I do with the scriptures. And I said, God has gifted me to do that, and thus it's an accountability. That is something that I must do. And if I give that up to go and do what 10,000 other people can do, then who will do what he has designed me to do? And Pastor Baker understood, and he said, he at one time years ago, he did say, well, you know, if you don't mind, maybe you could just come in and just so you'd be there, and then you could work in your office just so people would see you. And I understand, but that I did that a couple of times, and then I just said, no, not going to go there. And I think he understood why I did that. So I hope he did. Because my problem is I have no doubt that my thinking in the matter was accurate. So anyway, all right. Let's see if we can find something here. You have something, Becca?
To kind of clarify for those who might not understand your thinking in that matter. Going into the office like that made you available to others who wanted to talk, and thus how much work an intensive analytical study was.
Not only that, but there were people who wanted to come into my office and talk, and they didn't want to do the other work that needed to be done.
Yeah, that happened many times.
Oh my, how many times was that? You remember, there were times I used to keep my office door open, and it was like you were letting in like you had a chocolate cake in the office and you were letting in a bunch of flies.
It was a magnet.
And I finally just had to close the door and keep it closed.
It was like the light at Krispy Kreme.
Yes, it was. It was like the light at Krispy Kreme. Hey, Brother Sheets is open for business. Let's go in and talk to him about anything we want to talk about. Oh my. So that's okay. You know, and what's really funny about that? I don't really mind it. Because it forces me, just like your question, Pete, about that paragraph, it forces me to think there's a better way to express this. So I wrote that. I don't even know how long ago I wrote that, but when I wrote it, and I know what I was thinking then, But then when I reread the words, I think, no, that's not the best way to say it. And see, so when you ask the question, you want clarification, it forces me to think, what is a better way to say this, to communicate what I'm trying to get across, and how it relates to the centurion and his relationship to Jesus. So,
On those times when you would go, I would be doing menial tasks, and someone would say, "Hey, where's your husband?" And I would say, "He's around here somewhere," but I never said where you were.
there were times when I evaporated. So now you all know it's not my fault that I did not get my work done. It was always somebody else's fault. Well, maybe not. So anyway, and some of that fault lies with a certain young lady who was on earlier teaching Hebrew. So
Yes. Mhm.
She's
But
probably glad she hadn't been in your life that many years.
oh my. So yeah. I just now I can. She's good for being someone to take the blame though. So that's helpful.
Happy to help.
Yes. So anyway, let's go down here this thing about authority and think for a minute with respect to what happened between Cain and the Lord. And we've already seen the basic text here, but let's think about it just a little bit more. And you can see I've got a 2-column document here, and that's going to make it a little bit small, but and I could increase it a little bit for now. But I want to keep the where I've got my descriptive literal translation on the side as well. And so we have Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain was a tiller of the ground. And basically the idea that Hevel is the name Abel, and Cain, their names. So Hevel and Cain. Hevel was a shepherd of a flock. He took care of flocks of animals. And Cain served the ground. So he was probably a farmer. One's a rancher, the other's a farmer, although I don't think ranchers like sheep too much, as they say. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and the fat thereof. Now, it's interesting that God distinguishes the fruit of the ground from the firstlings of his flock and the fat thereof. And then immediately, right after he says that Hevel brought the firstlings of his flock and the fat, and the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. And unto Cain and to his offering, he had not respect. He did not accept it. And actually, when you go down a little bit more, and we'll see, and I have not finished the descriptive literal translation of this, but go here. And you can see a little bit of this. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, why art thou wroth? And why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted. And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. Now, we've already talked about that, I believe. Didn't we cover that? The 3:16 and 4:7 previously in here, Becca? Do you recall?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I thought we did. So looking at this, but keep in mind when we read in English and we say, why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well. Well, what is the word well? By the way, Becca, that's a good question for you. What is the word well in Hebrew? I don't remember that word in Hebrew anywhere.
There is not. We only have tov, good.
Oh, and that's exactly what God said here. So you look at this descriptive literal translation, and he's asking a question. And basically, it's that, does it not exist that if you will do good? So the word well is actually the word good. And keep in mind, good is that which conforms to the design of God. That which does not conform to the design of God is evil or bad. That which conforms is good. The definition of good is that which conforms to the design of God. So when the Lord asked him, he said, if thou doest, and let me submit to you, if thou doest according to my design for an offering, because that's what it would have been. It's not just, well, if you would just do a little better, that would be accepted. That's not what he said. What God is saying to him is there's something, the criteria of which is we call good, but it's the criteria of his design, the Lord's design. So when he says, if thou doest well, there has been a revelation of what is good in God's sight, that which is right, that has been revealed. And what God is saying is, if you would do according to the criteria of my design, and then he says, shalt thou not be accepted? The word is interesting word. It's the eighth. Lifting will exist. That is, that would be accepted of him. It would be lifted up by him to himself. But on the other side, he says, if thou doest not well, same kind of construction, but now there's a negative in it. If you do not do good, that is, if you do not do according to the criteria of my design, then, well, what does that mean? That constitutes Cain to be in violation of the design of God if he will not do good. If he will do good, lifting will occur. It will be received by God. It will be accepted. But if he will not do good in this matter of the offering, and the distinction between the offerings has already been made, if you will not make that distinction accurately and offer what you know you should, then you're in violation, Cain. And then God said, at the door, at the door, a violation offering, chatat, exists, rovet, lying in repose. And as we have said before, this was not sin crouching beside the door. And see, that's another one of those things. See, if some of our, I'll say it this way, I'm going to say it in a mean way. If some of our Baptist preachers would read what the text actually said and what God actually said, they would not come up with this idea, well, oh, sin was crouching right there. It was waiting to pounce on him and he needed to do, and then you can wax elephants after that. Well, that's not what God said. God said at the door, basically at the opening of whatever dwelling he was, at the door, a violation offering existed right there, right then, at that moment in time. But it was not crouching, waiting to attack him like a lion. It was lying there in repose, laid back, at ease, enjoying itself, lying by the door of Cain. It was right there. It was available to him to worship God. It was in his hands, with a possession of him. He didn't have to go out and buy it from somebody else. He didn't have to go out and make changes. He just had to go and get the offering. It was right there. But he would not. He would not. And so Cain was already in violation in the making of the offering. And he knew he was violating. And when the time comes now that God says, you need to offer that for me. And I don't know if I can't say the exact word exists there, but obviously for some reason, whatever this animal was, and it probably was an animal of the flock, lying by his door, and Cain said, no, I'm not offering that. That's my pet, basically, something like that. Because you look at the very next phrase down through here, the next two statements. God says, and unto thee shall be his desire. The shall be is italicized. Notice it. So, and unto thee exist his desire. This thing, this violation offering, this animal that was lying right beside the door was there. And obviously it had a desire. There was something that about that animal that it liked Cain, just like a pet would be. And so here's that animal. It likes Cain. Unto thee, God says, exist his desire. That animal has a desire for you. But God says, but you shall rule over him. My design, God says, is for you to rule over him. And then the question is, why didn't Cain do it? Why didn't Cain do it? Because Cain thought that he possessed sufficient authority to violate the design of God in the way that he wanted to, just like his father Adam had done. And I think about this, and as we've talked about in the matter of that revival, as we discussed that previously, these people are saying we have our own definition of quote unquote revival, which is it's garbage. And I'm not saying some people aren't positively affected, but I'm telling you there's something wrong. There is something dreadfully wrong. And I would not support it. I would not be a part of it. Unless if they asked me to come and preach, I would be glad to come and preach. But I wouldn't preach to them what they want to hear. I'd preach to them what God would want them to hear as best I could do. But the thing is, Cain was to rule over that tendency in himself to violate the design of God, and he did. And then, of course, we know that then he slew his brother. We've talked about that previously. But when you think about Cain's perception of the authority of God and his relationship to the authority of God, here's a man who basically is able to interact with God, speaking to him directly, and him speaking to God directly, and he does not accept the authority of God. He's going to insist upon his own authority, usurping an authority never delegated to him, but he's going to insist upon that so that he can do whatever he will. You know, I was thinking the other day about the matter of when God spoke to Adam and Eve and the serpent, and what God said was going to happen to Eve as a result of the violation, though he didn't state it exactly that way. But, you know, we think about, I was looking at something the other day, and a lady's expecting a child, and she has morning sickness, something like that. She has discomfort, morning sickness. And you think, that is a part of what God said is going to come. It is not there just to say, well, I'll get back at you. It is there for us to be reminded whenever we hear of a woman who has morning sickness, whenever we hear of a woman who's going to have labor and going to have to endure labor for some period of time. It's not a momentary thing. It's more time as a child is being born. And we hear that, and we should be reminded in ourselves, this is what came from our violation in our father Adam. This is what came when we rejected the design of God. This is the result. And thus, what we're doing when we reject the design of God, we're doing the same thing that Cain did. We're saying we have the authority to not just to do, but to discern what is good and what is evil for ourselves. And then we can decide. Reminds me of, what was that, Psalm 12, Rebecca, that we did in our exegesis class?
Our tongues are our own.
Our tongues are our own. I can say what I want, and who is Lord over us? And that's the way we are. It's throughout the scriptures. It's throughout our lives in the present day. So anyway, we're at a point we're probably supposed to stop. And but let me just read through this last little bit of this here. What Cain said to the Lord after he receives the word from God as to what's going to be a part of his life. And he says unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. I don't think so. I think he's still in a denial stage. Behold, you have driven me out this day from the face of the earth. Did he? No, he didn't. He didn't drive him out, but God knew that he would leave, and he would, because he couldn't stand to be around those who would know what he did. Thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid. What was Cain's perception of God? That God was here, but he could get out and he'd be able to get away from the face of God. There is no place to escape the face of God. So Cain's perception was very, very wrong in these aspects. And he says, I'll be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth. I'm going to be wandering all over, and it shall come to pass that everyone who findeth me shall slay me. Well, who is going, if there were other people on the earth at the time, and then Cain were to go out wandering among those people, how many of those people would know that Cain had slain Abel and would think that then he should be slain? There weren't other people. The only people who knew this were the people of his own family. And the Lord said unto him, very well, I'll set a mark on you so that you won't be slain. But that's not going to bring good things to the life of Cain, as we'd find when we go into the latter part of the chapter here. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord, the presence of the Lord, and dwelt in the land of Nod, not Nod. He didn't dwell in the land of Nod. He dwelt in the land of Nod, and Nod is the word for wandering. It is an infinitive construct that means to wander. So he dwelt in the land of wandering, and he went east of Eden. And if you want to know, and people say, well, where was Eden? We don't know. We don't know exactly. You can say it was in the Middle East. It may have been. But just like my wife and I were talking about the other day, and I said, isn't it interesting that when you follow the Appalachian Mountains all the way up to Maine, and the Appalachians go all the way up to Maine, and they end right at the Atlantic Ocean. But then when you go out into and cross the Atlantic Ocean, those mountains pick up on the other side. Now wait, how could that be? And in between, there's all this barren bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. The indication is that there was indeed one great continent. There was one original landmass that during the time of the flood, with all the cataclysmic events, the plate tectonics and everything, that the continents, it was split, and it split to the way we have it now, very closely. They're still moving, but they're not moving anywhere near as fast as they did during the flood. So it's interesting. Cain could go anywhere. He could go anywhere on the landmass, just wandering. And it was very different from what we have now. So, any thoughts before we go?